everyone, this week on At Home with Misty, we're going to make the medium seatbelt market tote from Cozy Nest Designs. All right, buckle up because we are going to be making this adorable seatbelt bag. It has these great slip pockets in the front, this cute little flap closure, a real zipper closure so your things won't fall out, as well as an inside pocket, and it's fully lined. So let me show you how to make this. First up, for your supplies, you are going to need 1 3/4 yards of your white seatbelt webbing, 7 yards of the honey beige seatbelt webbing, a 9-inch zipper, a 14-inch zipper, a 1/2 yard of the background that you'll use to build the exterior of your bag, 1 yard of your lining fabric, and 2 1/4 yards of interfacing, and I use Shape Flex. In addition to that, I use the 1 1/2-inch O-rings from Sally Tomato. You're also going to want a leather needle and some polyester thread. So now we're going to do some marking so we know where to place everything. So I'm going to grab my large ruler, and whatever your favorite marking tool is, all of this is going to be on the inside of your bag. You're not going to see it, so I'm just going to use a micron pen. We're going to begin by measuring in a 1/2 inch from both of the short sides. So I'll begin over here and just lay my ruler along this edge and mark all the way down this way, and then I'll flip this around and do the same thing on the other side. Just make sure it's all lined up. All right, and so then once we've marked those two short sides, we're going to actually take one of our rectangles that's going to be used for our slip pocket. This measures 7 by 13, and we are going to measure down 4 1/2 inches from the top and 9 1/2 inches from this side. So I'm going to begin by going this way, measuring over 9 1/2, and I can just sort of place this here for now, and then I'll come from the top, and we need to come down 4 1/2. So that needs to come down a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4, and another 1/2 inch. There we go. And so now that I have this here, I'm just going to grab a couple of pins to hold this in place. And then we are just going to baste this along these long edges. All right, so let's take this over to the machine. If you're not familiar with a basting stitch, that just means I'm going to lengthen my stitch length. It doesn't need to be too tight, and it's going to be close to the edge of that fabric. There we go. Can turn this around. Sew down the other side. Right. Now we'll take those pins out of there, and we can finish up our markings that we need to do. All right, so I'm going to begin by measuring over 16 inches. So I'm just going to use my mat here. So I've got this on the 3, so that means I need to come over to the 19, and this should be right in the middle of that pocket, in the middle of my background. And I'm just eyeballing, but it looks right to my eye. So we are just going to draw a line all the way down. And then we are going to rotate this, and we are going to measure in 5 inches from the top edge and mark all the way across. Just like so. So now we have 1/2 of our slip pocket ready to go, as well as our background for this. So let me show you how to do the other slip pocket. To make the other half of our slip pocket, I have another piece of my lining fabric cut at that 7 by 13, as well as what we call the slip pocket base that's also from your background fabric that's cut at the same size. And so we're going to place these right sides together, and we are going to sew along one of the long edges. So let's take this to the sewing machine. All right, and so just remember to shorten your stitch length back to regular since we just did some basting, and then we're just gonna sew down this side. Just make sure it stays lined up all the way down. There we go. All right, and so now I can flip this open and give it a good press. Okay. We'll fold along this top edge. Make sure we get our seam nice and straight. And we can give that a press as well. All right, so then now that we have that done, we're going to take the strip that is number 3 in the layout. And so in the pattern, there are a bunch of different ways that you can use the colors. I'm using the 2-color option, so you can see this is number 3 on the bag. So just 1, 2, 3 from the top. So we are using that beautiful honey color, and we are going to fold this in half to find our center. And we're going to do the same thing with our pocket. And I'm just going to finger press that so I have a mark. And then I will line that middle mark up with the center of the seat belt on the background side. And I'm going to make sure that it's about 1/8 of an inch down from the top edge. And then I'm just going to pin the center. And then we are going to sew straight across here to secure that to the seat belt. All right, so remember we're just about 1/8 inch down from the top edge of that seat belt, and then we can just sew right along the top edge of our pocket. All right, so once you have done that, we're going to flip this over and we're going to sew straight along the bottom edge of this part of our seat belt webbing to secure it to our pocket. Go, and then we're going to repeat that exact same process with numbers 4 and 5. So I'm just going to line this up and make sure my edges are matched, and then I'm just going to sew on the section that intersects with my pocket. All right, so once we have strips 3, 4, and 5 sewn down the lengths of our pocket, you can see how that looks. We can grab that background piece that we made earlier, and we are going to center this up, and we're going to line the top edge of that seat belt up with that mark that we drew 5 inches from the top of our background. So you can see I have that there. And then these will just line all the way across here. And you should have roughly 1/4 inch in from that drawn line that you marked, but if it's not exact, you don't need to worry about that. Then let me grab some pins and we can pin this in place. All right, so once we have this all pinned down, I'm actually going to go ahead and pull out this center pin now because I have it nice and secure. And we are going to make a few more marks on here. These marks you will see because this is the outside of our bag. So you want to use something that will either brush away or wash away. I have, where did I set it? There it is, my little chalk marker. And so we're going to start by marking our center. right down the middle there. This is a nice light white that I can see. It might be difficult for you to see, but I can see it right there. And then we're going to come in 10 inches from both of our edges. So I think I'll use my mat to do this. And I am just going to lay this on here and draw a line down this way. Just like so. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And then we're going to sew on those lines that we drew. Here we go. One more mark. And we'll take this to the machine and we're just going to sew the length of our 3 seatbelt strips. And this will secure our slip pocket to our background. And just make sure you're not sewing over any pins. There we go. Move over to the center. I'm going to back stitch there at the top and the bottom. And our last edge, I'm just going to roll this up so it's out of my way. Slide this all the way over. Go. All right, so now I can remove these middle pins and you can see that my slip pocket is starting to form. So I can slide my hand in here and then I have my lining fabric that is showing, which is what we are going for. So now we can continue laying out our strips and securing all of these to our background piece. All right, so our white pieces are going to go above those honey beige, just like so. And I'm just going to make sure that my edges are all kind of lining up or are close. And then we'll finish out this bottom. All right. And so this is how your background piece should look. We can go through and pin all of these into place. And then I'm going to do long stitches along the top and bottom of each of these strips, except for where we have our slip pocket. I'm going to stop on these outside vertical lines and do just these short runs on both sides so that our slip pocket stays working. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that and I'll meet you back here. All right, as you can see, I have all of this stitched down. I do want to point out you might want to change your thread color so that it blends in with the seatbelt. You could use invisible thread if you wanted, but all of our pieces are secure and I have trimmed the top and bottom so that I only have a 1/2 inch of that background fabric remaining. And so now all we are going to do is we're going to fold these in half, right sides together, and I'm going to sew this end with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And remember, we have our seat belt that is about a 1/4 inch away from that edge because we don't want to catch any of that into this seam. So let's take this over to the machine now, line up those edges, and we are making a tube. I'm just going to take a few stitches to start and then make sure my pieces are staying lined up, and then we can zoom down this side. All right, so now we can turn this right sides out. Just push this through. There we go. All right, so now that we have this turned, we can set this aside for a minute and we're going to start working on this flap strip that will actually cover all of these raw edges. All right, so this is making the little flap closure that will go over the front of the bag and then cover up this raw edge. So I have cut a piece at 21 inches and then I have a little 2 by 4 inch piece of my lining fabric as well as my ring. And so I'm going to begin by taking my marking tool and I'm going to measure up 1 3/4 inches from the end and draw a line just like so. And then I'm going to fold these two ends and I'm actually going to remark along here. This is a little hard to do, but just trust me here. We're going to hold this down. I'm just going to make a couple of little dots actually with my micron pen. This is going to be on the inside edge, so nobody's going to see it, and this will be super helpful to me. And so we're going to start by sewing straight across that line. You're going to want to take your time here. This is pretty thick with all of these layers. So we'll go ahead and back stitch. And sew straight across. There we go. All right, and so now once I've done that, I'm going to sew straight along these longer edges just to secure them down as well. And the other one. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and get all these threads out of the way so I don't have to worry about them. So I'll just trim these up. All right, so you can see how this looks. This is what we're going for. And then I'm going to take my little 2 by 4 inch rectangle and I'm going to center this over that. So this is right sides facing up towards me. I'm going to actually wrap this around the end and we are going to sew 1/4 inch away from this edge here. You can pin this in place. I'm just going to hold it and take this to the machine. There we go. Right. So then this will kind of flip up like so. I'm going to go ahead and give this a press just to get this to lay down because I want to fold these ends in like so. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Turn this so I can get it to lay down. There we go. And I think I'll go ahead and turn under this bottom edge as well, just so that I have a crease line, because it'll make it easier for me later. All right. So once I have that all pressed down, I can go ahead and take my 1.5 ring or 2 inch ring will work as well. And then I can slide this on here just like so. And then this is just going to fold back and cover the back of my seatbelt webbing, and then we're going to stitch a box just like so. So let's take this to the machine and do that. Okay, so I'm just stitching across here next to the ring. I'm going to leave my needle down and pivot. Just making sure everything is lined up. continue all the way around until I finish up my box. There we go. Now our ring is attached, so we can go ahead and add this to the back. All right, so we have the body of our bag as well as this strap that we just completed. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that that center seam that I have along the back is in line with that center mark that I made along the front. So I'm just making sure top and bottom is all centered and it looks great. And now that I've done that, we can actually make a few little marks. You can just take a little snip here at the top and bottom. And we're just going to use these later to center up. So you could cut a little V if you want, or just make a little notch. And I'm going to do the same thing along these edges, just so I have some reference points later. There we go. And then once we've done that, I can go from this center seam over 3 inches. And these are just a reference for where we will attach our straps later. So 3 inches from that middle seam, make a mark in both directions. And then let's go ahead and flip this over and do the same thing from the front. There we go. Just like so. Now we'll come back to this back side. We're going to take our strap and I'm going to center this on here. And I want to make sure that this is the top of this, not the top of the ring, but where the little loop is, comes up about 3.5 inches from the top edge of this bag. So we've got 1, 2, 3.5. And then I'm going to pin this in place. So you'll notice this is going to hang past on this bottom edge. That's what you're looking for. It's not going to line up exactly, so don't worry about that. Once I have this pinned down, I'm going to measure down about 1 inch, and then I'm going to sew along these straight edges all the way to the bottom. Okay, we have sewn this down the back. You might need to do halfway, stop, flip it around, and do the other half. I found that was really helpful. And now we're going to go ahead and make the straps. Remember, we already marked for those. So I have cut 2 pieces of my webbing at 24 inches long. And now we're going to fold these in half, just along the length. And we're going to measure up 2.5 inches. And I'm just going to make a little mark. I'm okay with this showing. If you want to use one that doesn't show, that is an option as well. And I'm going to do this on both sides because we're going to fold this all the way down. And in between these marks that we're making, we are going to sew a box. So I'm just going to put another one here so that you can see it as well. And then we can take this to the machine, and I'll start by sewing right in line with that, and then we're going to go all the way down to our other mark and back up. So I'm going to keep my needle down there and pivot, and I'm going to fold this, and we're going to go all the way down this length. Just stop in between and readjust if you need to. And we'll stop when I get to that other mark. Again with my needle down, and we we can pivot straight across. And come back down this other side. I went off the edge there, but that's okay. Can just start again. So you're going to do this for both of your straps, and then we can take this over to the outside of our bag that we've been working on, and I'm going to have the folded part of my seatbelt webbing down towards the body of this bag, and I'm going to line these up just along the outside edge of that mark. And you can put a clip or a pin here to hold them in place. Just like so. And of course we'll do the same thing with the other strap. Line those up. And then we are just going to sew these down using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's take this over to the machine. I'm going to go ahead and remove this table so I have a little bit more working room. And I can slide this in just like so and sew down this first strap. Just take my time, make sure everything's staying lined up. Oops. Go. Accidentally pulled this one out of its clip, but that's okay. And one more. Okay, all of our straps are in place, and so now we're going to box the corners. All right, so now we're going to finish this up and get ready to box our corners. So I'm going to start by trimming off this extra that we have on our seatbelt just in line with our strips, just like so. And then we are going to turn this wrong sides out. There we go. And we're going to use those little notches that we cut in earlier to make sure that everything is staying lined up again. So I've got those two little center notches as well as my sides in place. And so now we can sew along this bottom edge using about a 1/2 inch to a 5/8 inch seam allowance. It's going to be just inside of the bulk of those seat belts. And so we'll sew straight along this edge, and then we can box the corners. So let's do this to begin with. And I am just going to make sure and feel where the bulk of that is and make sure my needle is just on the other side of that. All right, so I've got this stitch line from when I sewed down the last webbing strip, and I'm just going to make sure My foot is right along that edge since I have this nice narrow foot. And that'll make sure I'm about an 1/8 inch away from that seam line and keep that bulk out of the way for me. Okay, there we go. So now we can open this up and pinch our corners. Make sure that they're laying nice and flat. We've pinched our corners just like so. And so we are going to measure down 2 inches from our point. And then we can draw a line here. Remember, we're working on the inside of our bag, so none of this will be seen. And we're going to stitch right on that line. And I'll do the same to both sides. Okay, we have now boxed both of the corners. The outside part of our bag is done. We are not going to trim this away, so we're going to set this aside and work on our lining. All right, so now that we have the outside of our bag done, we can start working on our lining. So I have cut my 2 lining pieces and put the interfacing on the back. And then we also have a piece that will be our inside zipper pocket that's interfaced, and I went ahead and marked according to the pattern. So I'm going to take that and one of my inside lining pieces, and I am going to center this on my piece and align these little notches that I've marked with the top edge of this lining, and then make sure it should have exactly 2 inches on either side. And so that looks good to go. I'm going to put a few pins in here to hold this in place. There we go. And then I'm going to sew exactly on this box that I drew. So let's take this over to the machine and do that. Needle down and pivot. Right. There we go. All right, now I can remove those pins. Let's bring this over here back to our cutting mat. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter now. And I'm going to cut right in between this area that I have sewn. And I'm just not going to go all the way to the edge. Leave a little bit of space. But I've cut through all those layers. And then now I can snip towards these outside corners, but not through them, just like so. One more. There we go. And then now we can push this through our opening. Go. We are just going to kind of force this to lay where we want it, and then I'm going to take this over to the iron and give it a good press. And it does take just a little bit of maneuvering to get everything to lay down the way you want it, and that's okay. Just take your time. So I'm just going to do one edge at a time. Working on this bottom side here. that one. There we go. Looks pretty good. All right, so once that is all done, you'll have this beautiful finished opening, and this is where we're going to add our zipper. So I've got my 9-inch zipper here, and we're actually going to use this little bit of fusible tape along the outside edge of both sides of our zipper. Whoop. Make sure it stays where I want it. There we go. We'll snip this off. Do the same on the other side. Okay. And now we can use a pin to score this and pull the backing off. Okay. And once we have all of that paper off, we can align this in our little opening. And of course, make sure you can view the head of your zipper and that it's just centered right in that opening that we've created, which that looks so nice. And now that's going to hold the zipper in place, and we can come back and top stitch all the way around all 4 sides. All right, so to start with, I've gone ahead and slid the head of the zipper out of my way so that it's not going to run into my presser foot. And I'm just going to start in this corner and top stitch right along the edge of our opening. Once I get close to where the head of that zipper is, I can keep my needle down, lift my presser foot, and slide that back up out of the way. And just keep going. And then I'll just pivot around these edges and go back down the other side. And finish this last little side here. There we go. So now we have our zipper installed, and then we can just pinch this piece here on the back. We'll fold it together so it's right sides together, like you see here. And then I'm going to sew down these 3 sides. All right, so we'll start on this side to enclose our pocket. I'm just using a regular 1/4-inch seam now. We'll turn and go across the bottom edge. Make sure it's all staying lined up. And one last side here to close up our pocket. There we go. Now our zipper pocket is set into our lining piece. Doesn't that look so nice? So then now we can take our other lining piece and put these right sides together. And then we are going to sew the two sides and across the bottom, leaving about an 8-inch opening because that's what we're going to use to turn our bag. And then we'll come back and box the corners. Okay, so I have enclosed the sides and most of the bottom. I left a pretty good size opening so we can get the bulk of the bag through, and I went ahead and boxed the corners in the exact same way that we did the outside. So I measured down 2 inches and sewed across. I am going to get rid of this excess on the lining portion. Remember, we left that on the outside of the bag. We can cut that away. And then I am going to make some marks for the center of the top as well so that we can get everything lined up. So I'm going to line up my side seams, and I'm just going to make sure those are exactly lined up, and then make a little snip here. And the same thing on this side. There we go. All right, now we can assemble our bag. All right, so I have turned my lining so it is right sides out. I still have the outside of my bag inside out, and I am going to feel free to pin anything out of the way that you're afraid might, get in the way when you're sewing. And then we are going to slide this inside of the bag, but you want to make sure that the zipper pocket side is pointing towards where the little flap that we added is, not towards where the slip pockets are. So I'm going to put this inside. Make sure that my little notch that I put in my center is lining right up with that seam. This would be a great time to put some clips or pins all the way around. And then we are going to sew all the way around this top opening using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. All right, so I have clipped all the way around this top edge, and we are going to sew with that 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to slide this under here and make my way all the way around. Remember, you are going to have some areas where you have your straps in there, so it's just a little bit bulkier, so just take your time. All right, I have turned my bag right side out after I sewed all the way along that top edge to attach our lining, and we turned it through that hole that we left in the bottom of that lining piece. And so now we're just going to make sure that our edges are all turned under and aligned, and we're going to do a top stitching all the way along this top edge. You can also stitch down this top side of your flap if it bothers you that it opens up more than that. And so let's go ahead and take this to the machine and do that. All right, we have made it all the way around our bag. We set this over here. So you can see this just acts as a tote bag. In the pattern, there is an optional zipper, which you'll notice on this one. It has the zipper that can close the top, which this is a really easy method to install the zipper, so definitely try that if you want. I'm going to leave mine just as a market tote, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you next time.
Hey everyone, it's Misty. Thanks for watching at home. If you aren't already a part of our Missouri Star family, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell if you want a notification every time we release a new video. I'll see you next Monday on the newest episode of At Home.